Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this session. Our topic, self-evolving agent, is centered around how agents operate in the enterprise, how they can learn and evolve, and step up the ladder from the simple human in the loop to autonomy and even beyond. Just to clarify, self-evolving means that there are no developers and engineers in sight. The agents need to learn on their own and become better and perform better. They learn from subject matter expert, the environment, and everything in between. Your speakers today are Jason Reynolds. Jason is the chief architect of Global IT with Accenture. Jason and Accenture probably have seen hundreds of workflows in the enterprise, automation-based workflows, agentic, and everything in between. So very rich experience. We'll hear from Jason. And my name is Michael Zimmermann. I'm with the Office of the CTO, where we work on novel agentic concepts with our top customers. Thank you for being here. So let's jump right into it. And I would like to make this presentation very pragmatic and practical. So I would like to focus on back office agents, agents that you see in HR, IT, finance, and those agents are performing workflow. They are called long-running agents sometimes, running in the background. And I want to give you a little quiz. There is one example of a workflow that all your companies probably is doing. And if I look at this specific workflow, across all companies in the world, if I aggregate the numbers, it's probably responsible for 30 billion transactions, $35 trillion pass through this workflow. And because the automation is brittle, or the agents are brittle, and you need human to step in with judgment and reasoning, you probably have around 1 to 2 million people clicking away and resolving problems, issues, exceptions in this workflow. So any guess which workflow it is? Excuse me? That's a good one. Payroll, wow. Well, thank you. These are exactly the back office agent we should focus next. But the examples are beautiful, but I actually want to pick on procurement to pay. And your examples were terrific, by the way. They have similar characteristics. So procurement to pay, which called also source to pay or invoice to pay, where you have very large intake of invoices. You do extraction and parsing. You call on system of record, contracts, purchase order, apply business logic, resolution. It's very similar to, it's a template for a back office agent. That process has business logic, and as we expect, automation and agents are brittle. And there is a lot of knowledge locked in the human brain that need to resolve these unblocked invoices or exceptions and failures. We in Google, in Alphabet, implemented this process. That's why I'm going through the slides, and I'll pick it as an example. And we saw a tremendous uplift, ROI impact, after implementing this agentic workflow. I can say that we are on a path to save 3-digit millions of dollars because we identify this process. Now, of course, Alphabet, Google has a a large volume of invoices, but it's a common practice to assume that 1% of the invoices are potentially duplicates, are overbilled. So definitely a goal for all of us to identify. However, why the industry as a whole not chasing that and implement it tomorrow morning with agents? The fact of the matter is agents in the back office are difficult, and these are the typical 3 major hurdles that we see. The number one, the cold start. You need to scrape a lot of information, knowledge, policy, SOP, and communicate them well to the engineers. But engineers and domain experts, they are on 2 sides of a fracture line, not speaking the same language. So this is a very hard process. The second one, system of records. Agent calling of system of records, pulling information from Ariba, SAP, is not like what human does, clicking away on the web UI. Both system of record hurdles and cold start are important to be resolved during development time. And we in Next presented multiple building blocks with the enterprise, with Gemini Enterprise agent platform that can help. But today I want to focus on the potential of agent stagnation. So you launch the agent to the real world, and then environment change, policy change, SOP change, and the agent, without having a path to learn and self-evolve on its own, will simply start deteriorate and age out. And this is a big problem, because we want our agents to grow into autonomy and grow their performance. And in all the back office that we gave here as an example, we have a similar characteristic. There is always this private knowledge that typically human holds, or it's buried somewhere in the organization, that the agents are not aware to. And human judgment is always needed to complete this autonomy of the agent. If you think about it, the environment that the agent operates in is extremely adversarial, because the changes happen very frequently. Here is an example of, again, a real-world example that you have the agentic flow operates on source to pay, but then you have a new approval policy. You have a new email from the CFO that change a certain regulatory check. You have a new audit. So the agent, to become better, keep his accuracy or grow, constantly need to adapt. And of course, if you put a lot of engineers and developers in the loop, you lose the economic value of the agent. I'm a big Darwin fan, and I took a page from the Darwin science, and you all probably know that not the most intelligent, the strongest survive. It's those that can adapt. So kind of as a metaphor, I borrowed a little bit and changed it for the agents that are being thrown into the human spaghetti of the enterprise business flows that we all created. And I think that, of course, eval are important, and we do a lot of effort to have baseline accuracy, but there is a significant belief that the agent that will learn fast will reach autonomy faster in a more reliable way than agents that stagnate and don't have a mechanism to learn. So how agents learn, and what is the nearest term opportunity to learn on the job? So when we design the agents, agent engineers, the SMEs, they are infused with what we call surface knowledge, your policy, your documents, your BigQuery data, everything that is visible on top of the surface. However, we all know that enterprises, your companies, operate with a lot of tribal knowledge, with a lot of shortcuts, with a lot of localized Excel sheets or documents in your laptop that were not exposed to the agents. So this is an extremely near-term, low-hanging fruit for us to tap into and make the agent more intelligent, adaptable, and be infused with the real knowledge of how the enterprise and how humans operate. So this is our first goal, and you'll see that we have a much more compelling North Star to have the agent learn from other sources, but the tribal knowledge, this dark knowledge, is extremely critical. It's not exposed typically to engineers at design time. So what we propose, this is the architecture, reference architecture we propose. We nickname it Agent Gym, where agents go to get better and perform in a much higher level, eventually to autonomy. And here is how it works. The concept is general, should operate on any back office agents. The back office agent emit failures, rejection, reports, and for example, for invoice to pay is invoice that got rejected and not accepted, broken some rule. I'm sure for every back office agent we have a different set of artifacts, but the gym will get that, and the agent gym, treat failures as gold. It's not data is gold, but failures, how can I learn? Every failure is opportunity to learn. And in the gym, there is a function called learning agent that looks at the failure, look at the blueprint of the agentic flow, the business rules, all the information, all the artifacts, and then will seek to mine or get information from the human expert, one or more. You see that there is potential to learn from one human expert, the chief accountant, the AP department, the junior person, the junior officer, whoever it's being configured. And the learning agent will seek to extract the judgment of the human. What is the tribal knowledge? What is the reasoning that the human apply in this case? And the learning agent will try to create friction with the human expert in an effort to understand how it should apply the knowledge in a more strict way or a general way. It will test the boundaries. It will be very interesting. I'll show you a demo in a second. And eventually, it will distill a knowledge that will help the back office agent resolve any future corner case or failure mode or exception of this sort. And one of the most important things here is we are building a construct that can learn from example of one. Very much like us, human, when we go to our supervisor or our manager, we learn from example of one. This is how the gym operates. Example one, engage in conversational or retrieving data from your enterprise context, and then eventually, after this interaction, distill knowledge. By the way, there are other creative ways for the gym to learn. I'll just give you an example. You know, there is a new state regulation for compliance and audit. The agent gym have public access for search, so he can say, in an unsolicited way, to query the domain expert, hey, should we impose a new rule or change the agent based on this public knowledge? So a lot of capabilities here. We did a couple of experiments and learned amazing things about the learning capabilities of Gemini. So here you see an example of the learning agent conversing with the human expert. And you can see that there is a situation of an invoice without a purchase order, but only for $85, which is very minuscule. End of quarter, low value invoices, and the CFO is okay to approve these invoices, but nobody told the agent at design time that this is okay. So it keeps looking for the purchase order. So the human expert says, well, you know, less than $1,000, which state clear service, go ahead and approve. This is the human expert feedback. And now you see the learning agent, because the LLM knows so much about regulation, audit, compliance, back office agent, will challenge that and will say, you know, you say below $1,000, but what specific categories I should exclude from this knowledge? It tried to make it more strict or more general in other cases. And the human expert says, yeah, all your examples are good, reject invoices which look fraudulent. The learning agent look at the word fraudulent, immediately go into action to seek the knowledge augmentation that will help it avoid approving fraudulent. So it will ask, hey, should I deal only with supplier with existing payment history? Which is a novel idea. By the way, these are real traces of learning and human expert interaction. And this go on for, you know, there is 3 iterations here, and eventually there is a knowledge nugget that the learning agent or the GIM decide that invoice under $1,000 with clear service categories can be approved without PO, unless there are goods, core business services, etc. And this is all real. This is really happened in the GIM, and we didn't tell the GIM this is a source to pay. It can happen for, you know, the customer support, can happen for payroll, and because LLM knows a lot about payroll, knows a lot about customer support, but it doesn't have the bespoke tribal knowledge of the human expert or the localized information of the enterprise. Now, the architecture offer also, during the step up to autonomy, to gain trust of the human expert. So we believe in the GIM there are kind of 4 knobs that are very important. How specific is the knowledge nugget you extract? How much it can be generalized? What is the trust you render to the agent? And what's the human toll? You want to save a lot of labor and errors, etc. So just to give you an example, if there is a knowledge, an exception that if it's misinterpreted can cause a catastrophic error, you probably render less trust and make this rule very strict. Do not allow it to generalize. But if there are knowledge, let's say in this purchase order, in this case of invoice below $1,000 without purchase order, maybe you will allow it more, to generalize more and not to be strict only per supplier or certain service. These are very important traits because eventually the people, the persona that will say, hey, this agent is autonomous, are those domain experts that understand perfectly well the back office agent. In this next, we released a platform, a Gemini Enterprise agent platform that has major building blocks that allow you to build agent GIM. To mention a few, first of all, the surface level of Gemini Enterprise offer building employee agents, developer agents, And who knows, maybe clients' agents may be consulted through this learning process. We still did not experiment with that, but it can be an interesting capability. And I would like to mention a couple of building blocks that we announced, which are very important for building agent gym. First of all, the baseline ADK and agent runtime. You actually need to build the agents and run them. Agent identity and security, very important. If you have several learning agents, you don't want them to run rogue and poison the knowledge base. Agent observability, very important, because once agent fail, he needs to spill his guts and send it to the gym and explain exactly what happened, so the gym can analyze and create the maximum learning and interrogation or question to the domain expert. Also, humans are not so good giving feedback. They are very brief and sparse, so agent to UI will become increasingly important, that per knowledge path and learning path, we can create a bespoke UI that center around this knowledge distillation and make it easy for the domain expert to provide this knowledge, this judgment to the gym. A big question is how you encode human judgment and knowledge. So in early experiments, on the right side, you see a structure, keys and fields to store the knowledge. The knowledge is stored as a natural language, invoice under $1,000, clearly described, so and so, but other fields are encoded really well. This is good for finance or back office agents that are highly structured. However, there are other fluid agentic flows that will benefit from knowledge that is structured like skill. So on the fly, you create new skills for the agent to become better and will not hit the same failure mode. We're experimenting with both. I think the right-hand side proven its usefulness for back office agents that are agentic overlay on top of deterministic automation processes, but they can be hybrid of knowledge bases that can operate. You don't need necessarily to encode knowledge only in a single way. LLMs are extremely good operating in structure, non-structure, free-flowing skill-like knowledge. And I think it's actually a huge asset, because once you have that, your domain expert, your SMEs can look at this knowledge and basically have a complete understanding how your enterprise, your back office flow works. The tribal knowledge, the under the surface knowledge, the human shortcuts, it's if you have your policy updated by the second all the time. We believe at this point that this structure is built per back office agentic flow. So there is a limit to a tribal knowledge or human shortcuts. It can be hundreds of entries, thousands of entries, maybe 10,000s of entries. So it's not like, we are building a world model. And at some point, there will be a useful process to look at the knowledge base. You see here it's from a live run of the knowledge base, and all the purplish numbers show how many times the agent retrieved the knowledge and find it useful. So you see, for example, price discrepancies is high on the chart. So now there is opportunity to look at this knowledge base and figure better optimization ways for the agent, like new tools, prompt optimization, you name it. This is almost an open-ended capability to optimize the agents. And of course, after we instill a new knowledge, we want to pressure test it with evaluation and synthetic data. And we think that this can be useful to manage the knowledge, what happens if knowledge entries conflict with each other or corroborating each other. And eventually, the North Star is to create simulation, because once the agent completes its learning from the domain expert, the student is smarter than the master. Now it will need simulation to learn on a corner case, on future failures. Okay, I'll show you a short demo. We recorded it in a video. It's a live demo that was recorded. It's the source-to-pay agent, and now because this agent is running in the background, it doesn't have necessarily a human interface, we need to look behind the scenes at the logs that it emits and understand what's going on, because it runs through system of record, business rules, multi-agents in action. So let me fire it up. So this is the invoice to pay, modeled around what we've done in Alphabet. You've seen that invoice all the way. And this is the agent after the gym that is tapping into the knowledge, and this is the gym. Now, let me stop it. On the left side, we see the agent before the gym. And apologies that it's only logs, but I'll try to explain what's going on here. There's an intake of an invoice here. Invoice goes into the agent. It looks for a purchase order, find it, contract, and then start doing all the business rules, supplier match, payment, all of that, and then route it to the payment system. So golden invoice, worked well, real life. None of your invoices or purchase order are here. It's all synthetic data, so no worries. But this is the agent operating. Now, on the right-hand side is the agent after the gym. So you'll see that each run, the agent looks, before it resolves the exception, it looks at the knowledge base and try to evaluate whether the decision was correct or not and provide justification. So, for example, here, it didn't find any knowledge entry. So it kept the rejection, the original decision of the agent. But in the next example, we'll see that it tried to resolve an exception and found 5 knowledge entries, and is now trying to reason with the additional knowledge, the additional tribal knowledge. And in a second, you will see that it decided to approve this invoice, to overrule the original agent decision, because now he's smarter and has tribal knowledge entries. And the cool thing is it provides justification. Now, I can tell you under the hood that there was a supplier mismatch because there was a legal suffix to the supplier name, which is sometimes by compliance and audit not allowed, but the tribal knowledge says, Acme and Acme Limited are the same. Go ahead, approve. So the agent followed this new tribal knowledge and approved. Here in this pane, we see a live trace that was recorded of the learning agent with the human expert. And here you will see that the agent hit an invoice that was rejected from Starlight Engineering Incorporated, but he expected Starlight Engineering, period, without the legal suffix. So it'll seek help, and the human said, hey, just approve it. But the agent, again, because he knows a lot about audits and he knows a lot about compliance, he will ask, hey, there is a limit for the invoice, or should I apply it for every company? And eventually, after the human expert decide, what's the strictness level, how generalized it will be, the knowledge nugget is created down here, and it goes into the database, which I'm giving a sample here of the different knowledge nuggets. So you see basically how the agent provide utility, provide a lot of help day one, but it becomes better because it retrieves knowledge nuggets, tribal information, compare constantly extracted human reasoning, and improve over time while interacting and gaining trust with the domain expert. Now it's my privilege to invite Jason to talk us through the real world of workflow across enterprises.
I couldn't be prouder to be here. The innovation that we've been able to do with Google is absolutely fantastic. But as an architect, we always have a bunch of questions, right? I'm going to focus today on two real questions. The first one's how, and the second one's why. And in my natural order, I'm actually going to start with the why. When we're looking at agentic, we actually are thinking of November 30th of 2022. That changed our world. What happened? ChatGPT released. Yes, we may have been thinking about it a little bit before then, but that's the first real time that AI came into our natural lives. It's when we started to think about what the world of possibility is. Quite frankly, if I'm being fully transparent, about 45 days later, and I emailed it to somebody in the room, I wrote a paper, and that paper was called Gen Transactional, because at the time, we were calling everything Gen, let's be honest, right? I'm so glad as an industry we actually chose a completely different name. Agentic is much better, because we as humans will have to actually yield our agency to agents as we look at the future. When we really start to think about what that experience enabled for us, it actually started back in the previous process with us actually executing work. It all comes down to work, right? When we're looking at work, we really thought of it in the consulting realm and in other realms in three different dimensions. You had people, the right people with the right knowledge, doing the right job, executing the right process with optimal technology. Those in the room really focused on that third one more than likely, but also on the other two as we went about this process. When ChatGPT released and agentic came into our life, it actually created this whole new dimension of work being executed. Humans no longer have to be the only source of executing work. I can actually start to codify, as Michael just showed us in that great demo, the actual execution of work. I can yield my agency to agents. And so now I have this multi-dimensional capability to truly accelerate my capacity and my capability as an organization, as an enterprise, to deliver more and more value to my customers and my clients. It truly dimensionalized that, and it truly brought us a breakthrough that we haven't seen in this space before. The next question is the how question, right? How does this happen? In Global IT with Accenture, we really have broken it down into 5 archetypes of how work gets done. The first archetype is kind of the legacy archetype, right? It is us following that process, using technology, creating work. For many, many years, predecessors to me and others used that process and optimized it along the way. About 15, 20 years ago, depending on where it was, we started to see archetype number 2, which is this more deterministic augmentation of capability come along. And we've been very successful with putting RPA and automation into our process, taking care of that deterministic type of outcomes. And the more automation we had, the better. The more capacity we had, it gave us an incremental value of the work we were able to deliver. It's the last 3 archetypes that have really spawned up in the last couple of years. And that's where I'm able to start to take advantage of that augmentation of human capacity. I'm able to look at information, gain insights, look at stuff that I was never able to look at in a direct order before. I had to go search for, or I had to go do this, or I had to go do that. When ChatGPT and Gemini and others are out there at my fingertips, I'm able to augment my knowledge at a more rapid pace. That adds value. So archetype 3 is still a huge value add. Right now, we're kind of in archetype 4. And I should note that these archetypes are not independent. It's not like you just go with archetype 5 or archetype 1. You'll use all of them in the flow of business, but some of those things will get over to 5, and we'll cover that in a second. But archetype 4 is kind of where we're at today, where we've got the co-pilot and really the autopilot being able to handle certain tasks within workflows. We're able to automate those. We're able to create agents that handle that function. With that 5th archetype kind of being that nirvana state of true acceleration of human capacity. And that's when we move into the autonomous space, where we're able to delegate our agency to a trusted source to be able to accomplish an outcome on our behalf. Again, creating that force multiplier. So these 5 archetypes of work really is the how behind all of AI. With that, we actually have to ask a couple very important imperatives that we have to get right in order to move to that 5th dimension or that 5th archetype. The first of those questions is, how can I trust agentic? How do I know that it's going to give me the right answer every time, on time, as it's processing a business function? I don't want to send the wrong payment unless it's to my bank account for payment to me, but that's a whole different conversation. To the wrong vendor for the wrong amount. I need to be able to trust that it's going to go through that process with excellence and proficiency at a scale that I, as a human, have to set. But the second thing, and Michael kind of mentioned it in the course of the conversation here, is that things change. Business environments are very fragile, but they're also very chaotic. Companies change names. Alphabet, anybody? Business processes change. Function flows change, operating procedures change, values that the CFO says, yes, you can approve this value or this invoice for X dollars, that changes too. So we need to be able to build all of those into an agent. Well, quite frankly, it's almost impossible to build all of that logic into an agent. And LLMs, as great as they are, never know the nuance of your business or my business. That's the piece that my domain experts have that unique ability to truly understand. My business operators, they know the landscape. They know that when things change, that, okay, I can go ahead and approve that. They've already proven that process over and over. It's why they're in the role and why they're proficient in the role. Agents haven't had that ability until now. And what Michael just presented to you with the Agent Gem is exactly that. It's a verifiable component to allow me to establish that trust, establish that reliability, and truly understand from those that are owning the process, that are yielding their agency to that agent in the future, what logic mechanisms they went through to make that decision. So the knowledge nuggets that Michael was showing you is in essence the reasoning logic that actually goes into an agent. It's what you as a human would have considered as the mundane task. We're now able to hand that over to an agent because the agent's able to learn from us as we're doing those tasks during the execution of it. But again, that's only the first portion. The second portion of the Agent Gem is, it's not a one and done. It's just not on instantiation of agents. It's actually on the execution of the agents. Once I get it into production, things will go bump in the night. Things will change within that business chaos that I was mentioning. Agents will fail. We've read the articles. We know that that happens. We're doing everything we can to stop it. However, Agent Gem actually offers us a whole new dimension of that. Because I can set quality thresholds, I can set proficiency thresholds, and basically send an agent back to the gym with me as a domain expert to have it work with me through the business process to actually yield the outcome. I'm so excited about what we've co-innovated here and truly offering into this agentic space.